Well, welcome to winter. I suppose for our physical safety, winter storms arriving on a holiday weekend is a good thing. But we don't want to miss out on acknowledging the importance of this particular holiday. Because on this Martin Luther King Jr. Day, we remember someone who followed the way of Jesus with his whole heart and eventually with his life. We remember the loss of this person who changed our country and in many ways changed the world. Today we want to make sure that we pay attention also to the joy that he experienced in life, the joy that has been the ongoing fruits of all of his efforts. For Martin Luther King Jr. learned how to be an activist from Jesus. And he learned how to follow his passion and purpose in life with joy from the same source. The first place that we see this combination of acting on your calling with joy is in the story that we read today. The story has Jesus beginning his ministry at an ordinary community event. The first miraculous act of kindness takes place at a wedding. At a celebration, a covenant of love between two people, of joining two families, and of strengthening social ties. And here we get to see a glimpse of Jesus and his mother as human beings who had friends and who partied and who fretted when something went wrong and who felt some responsibility to help out when things weren't going as planned. So Mary sees a problem and she wants to help. And Mary's actions express a compassionate sensitivity to other people's needs. And so this story reminds us that Jesus was raised in a family who taught him to practice compassionate justice. So when the wine gave out at this party, Jesus' mother says to him, "They have no wine." This is a big deal. But Jesus responded, "Woman, what concern is that to you and me? My hour has not yet come." This always makes me laugh, and especially after the story that we read last week about that 12-year-old Jesus scaring his parents and then arguing with his mom. This is great. This time, Jesus tells her, "My hour hasn't come." Basically, this isn't the right time to start. And we usually assume that Mary didn't understand what God had planned. But what if she did? She sounds a lot like a mother who knows that her grown child is ready to step out into the world even before they know it. Mary is encouraging Jesus to step into his purpose. And he seems to be resisting, saying, "This isn't the right time. My hour hasn't come." But the time had come. This was the perfect place to start that first step. Now, for Jesus, this wedding at Cana marks the beginning of the end. The first step will lead to the last step, which will include standing up to the powers that be and to death on the cross. So this beginning of a life journey will involve pain as well as joy. But the journey begins with celebration, a feast flowing with wine and joy. And Mary ignores her son's response, and she tells the servants to do whatever he tells you. Sometimes mom just knows things that kids aren't ready to see. And nearby there were 6 stone water jars used for the Jewish cleansing ritual. Each was able to hold about 20 or 30 gallons. And Jesus instructed the servants to fill the jars with water, and they filled them to the brim. And then Jesus told them to draw from them and take what they drew out of the jars to the head waiter. And they did as they were instructed, and suddenly they find a shocking result. This cleansing water had changed into wine that was better than anything they had tasted. Now, providing good wine at a feast echoes the words of Isaiah. The the Lord host, will make for all peoples a feast of rich food, a feast of well-aged wines, of rich food filled with marrow, of well-aged wines strained clear, and he will destroy the shroud that is cast over all the peoples, the sheet that is spread over all nations. God will swallow up death forever. For Jesus to begin his public ministry then by providing good wine at a wedding banquet is a sign that he had come to fulfill this prophecy, to fulfill the role of Messiah. And his disciples believed because they understood this message. This message that Jesus offers with this new wine is meant for the people of Israel, and it is meant for everyone. As Paul will eventually say, in Christ there is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female. And it all began right here at a party. This wine-making miracle is an outbreak of joy, joy that serves as a sign of the presence of God active in the world. And it's the first sign, the first action, in a life dedicated to demonstrating the love of God for all people, a life of standing up for the poor and the outcasts, a life of activism and teaching and healing and breaking some rules and turning over a few tables. Now, author and activist Karen Walren suggests that activism is about creating experiences of meaning. Activism means taking responsibility to find answers to the world's problem, dedicating yourself to a cause greater than your own interests. And joy is an essential ingredient of a life of activism. For happiness occurs in a moment as an immediate reaction to an event, and it can fade as quickly. Happiness is transient. But joy, on the other hand, is something more profound and long-lasting. Joy finds itself rooted in much deeper things like meaning and purpose. And joy can also arise directly out of sadness and pain and loss. I think sometimes the problem with our media today is that, they are reminding us constantly of the pain of life. They inspire rage by giving us the information that we need to know about things that are not going well, about the harm that is being done to people. But they keep pushing the rage and never move from the anger to the actions needed to resolve it, or to finding joy in this process of activism. The psychologist Sean Anker argues that we can actually train our brains to be more joyful. Research indicates that when our brains are positive, they perform significantly better than when our brains are negative and stressed. When we are in a place of joy, our intelligence rises, creativity rises, energy levels rise when we are joyful. And Martin Luther King Jr. tried to tell us that our choices and our actions need to start from love rather than rage. For he said, returning hate for hate multiplies hate and is adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. For hate multiplies hate, and violence multiplies violence, and toughness multiplies toughness in a descending spiral of destruction. Now, we lost another human rights icon and role model recently in the death of Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Desmond Tutu spent years leading the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa and then around the world, listening to people's stories of the horrific suffering they endured, of the violence they experienced, the sadness that had swallowed them up. But he continued listening because he knew he was creating a space for them to release the pain, to start over, to finally be able to experience joy in life once again. Now, Douglas Abrams writes about his meeting with Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama, where they agreed about the importance of joy in all that they do, in all of their work and their life. Cultivating your own joy and happiness has benefits not just for you, but for others in your life. When we are able to move beyond our own pain and suffering, then we are more available to others, because it's the pain that causes us to be extremely self-focused. So it's true that the more that we heal our own pain, the more that we can turn to the pain of others. But a point that Archbishop Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama were making is that the way that we heal our own pain is actually by turning to the pain of others. It's what they call a virtuous cycle rather than a cycle of destruction. The goal is not just to create joy for ourselves, but as Archbishop Tutu phrased it, it is to be a reservoir of joy, an oasis of peace, a pool of serenity that can ripple out to all those around you. Joy is, in fact, quite contagious, as is love and compassion and generosity. And they were again echoing the words of Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "Those who are not looking for happiness are the most likely to find it, because those who are searching forget that the surest way to be happy is to seek happiness for others." Now, Alice Faye Duncan is, I think, one example of living out your passion, your particular passion, to change some smart part of the world and to change it with joy. Now, she is a librarian who decided to write some children's books for children and young adults. She was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, and focused on that history. She describes the goal of her work. She says, "I am hoping that I will make history so alive and emotionally palatable that young readers will be inspired to carry on the legacy of those activists." Now, the reader doesn't have to be a civil rights activist, but I want them to find their own personal passion, their own personal joy, and pursue that. Much like Jesus. Jesus' first miraculous move was to surprise a family with a fresh batch of wine that saved a celebration of life and love. It was a small act given in love and bringing more joy into the world. So you don't have to be a full-time civil rights activist to follow Jesus or to follow your purpose. You just need to pay attention to what brings you joy. Maybe ask yourself, what needs in the lives of those around you sparks your passion? Listen to your heart. Listen to the Spirit's quiet whisper in your life. Then what small steps can you take to lighten someone's load, to stand with those who are struggling? What can you do to increase your joy and to bring a little more joy into the world?